Your responsibility as an employee who handles hazardous materials has never been greater. In a world where terrorism has proven to be a very real threat to homeland security, you must be even more aware of the potential dangers you may face simply based on the hazmat you work with. The Research and Special Programs Administration, RISPA, has recognized this as well and has issued a ruling that requires all hazmat employees receive security awareness training. This training must cover how to recognize a potential security threat and how to respond accordingly. As you watch this program, please keep in mind the important responsibility you have as a hazmat employee. By recognizing and appropriately dealing with a potential threat, you will be in a position to protect your company, your community, and yourself. Hazardous materials are all around us. They're solids, liquids, and gases that can significantly benefit industry, the medical community, and even you as a consumer. These materials are helpful to us when handled correctly, but have the potential to cause harm when handled incorrectly. Because hazardous materials pose a variety of dangers, we must use care when packaging, handling, and transporting them. Unfortunately, more than 13,000 hazardous materials spills or leaks occur each year. The majority due to human error. Preventable, avoidable human error that can cost hundreds of thousands of dollars in cleanup and repairs. And the threat to people and the environment can't be calculated, because sometimes the damage caused is devastating. That's why there are steep fines, up to $27,500, and even jail time for violation of regulations that govern the transportation of hazardous materials.
The amount of the fines has to do with the gravity of the violation itself, and RISPA wants to make sure that the company recognizes how serious the violation is and is forced to do something about it.
I think if you train your employees well and you have procedures, standard operating procedures, to cover all the areas where hazards will occur, that you can eliminate a lot of those hazards and cut them to just about nothing, and that's the important thing.
Rather than living in fear of the potential for harm, each of us can do something positive. We can act to ensure the safety of hazardous materials in the transportation system by understanding and complying with the hazardous materials regulations. Hazardous materials, or HazMat, is regulated by the Research and Special Programs Administration of the Department of Transportation. The Hazardous Materials Regulations, also known as the HMR, are located in Title 49 of the Code of Federal Regulations, Chapter 1, Subchapter C. Under the HMR, all HazMat employees are required to be trained. If you're viewing this video, you may be a HazMat employee, someone who directly affects the safety of hazardous materials during transportation.
Companies need to determine who of their employees fit the definition of HazMat employee, and these are generally the employees who interact with hazardous materials in preparation for transportation.
I think it's a dual responsibility, that of the employer and the employee. The regulations make it the responsibility of the HazMat employer to train and certify the employees, but once the employee is aware of the dangerousness and the seriousness of the HazMat that they're working with, it's in their best interest and the best interest of all the people that work around them to make sure that they truly understand what the material is, what the implications can be, and any way that they can prevent an unintentional release.
Hey, Jim.
Good morning.
Everyone whose job somehow affects the transportation of HazMat must understand his or her role in safeguarding its travel. It's a big responsibility, but it's shared equally among many people. The manufacturers who make the packaging, the workers who package the hazmat, the clerks who prepare the shipping papers, the handlers who load and unload shipments, as well as drivers, pilots, captains, and engineers who transport the hazmat shipments. Because your job affects hazardous materials in some way, your job is important, and you can make a difference. When everybody does their part, spills or leaks of hazmat, called hazardous materials incidents, are less likely to happen. Hazmat employees are required to receive training in 4 areas. General awareness and familiarization training spells out the HMR's requirements, enabling you to recognize and identify hazmat. Security awareness training teaches you how to recognize a potential threat and what to do if you encounter such a threat. Function-specific training ensures, whatever your job may be, that you perform the specific tasks of your job correctly. Safety training teaches you about emergency response information, how to prevent accidents and incidents, and ways to protect yourself from exposure to hazmat on the job. Training ensures that uniform practices will be used to classify and describe hazardous materials, select appropriate packaging, communicate hazards through labels, markings, and placards, prepare shipping papers and emergency response information, and handle hazmat correctly for the mode of transportation, air, rail, water, or highway. Consistent training should ultimately reduce the occurrence of hazmat incidents caused by human error. No one wants to be responsible for a hazardous materials incident. That's why this training is critical to you.
It's important for our new chemical employees to know how to handle these materials in order that they can protect themselves, as well as to assure that we don't create any incidents internally or out in commerce.
If you slip up, you close a valve wrong, if something leaks, something spills, you're in danger of losing your life.
Because of the inherent dangers of hazardous materials, the HMR is very detailed. Don't let the sheer volume of information intimidate you. The many parts and subparts are intended to help you comply with the regulations and handle hazmat safely. It's not meant for you to memorize, but to use as a resource for locating the key information you need. As you become more familiar with the regulations, it will become easier to find information when you need it. It may be helpful to tab the sections for easy reference, such as the Hazardous Materials Table, Appendix A, Appendix B, and the Segregation Table. There are additional modal-specific regulations for each form of transportation: air, rail, water, and highway. We will concentrate on the U.S. or domestic regulations for highway transportation, but be aware that other regulations and standards apply for hazmat delivery outside the U.S. According to the HMR, it's the responsibility of shippers to identify and classify the hazardous materials they ship and assign them with proper shipping names.
It's important that shippers of hazardous materials understand HMR because they give these materials their initial classification. That's important because anybody who will handle these materials or come in contact with them down the line will have to know how to properly segregate these materials, how to properly handle them, and how to avoid incidents and accidents.
That name clues everyone that comes in contact with that package what kind of hazard is presented by that package. If the shipper doesn't classify and identify the material correctly, then everyone who comes in contact with the package is going to have incorrect information to work with.
Once a product leaves the plant that it's in, now it's going down the highway, and all you have is some basic information on those drums and on those labels, on the bill of ladings. And the better they've classified them, the easier it makes it when the emergency response teams come out to deal with those kind of things. So that training becomes critical.
The first step is to determine if the material is indeed hazardous. According to the HMR, a hazardous material is a substance or material which has been determined by the Secretary of Transportation to be capable of posing an unreasonable risk to health, safety, and property when transported in commerce. The hazmat is assigned to one of 9 classes: based on the hazard characteristic it possesses. Some classes are further broken down into divisions. For example, Class 1 explosives has 6 divisions. Dynamite is assigned to Division 1.1. Materials in this division are handled quite differently than sparklers, which are also Class 1 explosives, but are assigned to Division 1.6. In this case, the explosive risk decreases as the division number increases. In some classes, the division indicates a characteristic or property. Class 2 has 3 divisions, but it's important to note that not all hazard classes have divisions. Some hazmat are further described by packing groups. The packing group is represented by a Roman numeral 1, 2, or 3. The packing group indicates the severity of the hazard. When preparing hazmat for transportation, you need to know how to use the Hazardous Materials Table, or HazMat table. It's designed to make hazmat preparation easier.
The purpose of the hazmat table is to tell the hazmat employee exactly what to do. It's going to help them identify the material, classify it, give them the proper UN or NA number, give it any restrictions, how to properly label it. In essence, it tells them how to assure that that package is absolutely correct when it leaves the shipper's facilities.
Even though the employee may not be selecting the packaging or may not be selecting the labels, it's important that they understand the process that was used.
The table lists all the proper shipping names that can be used for hazmat in the U.S. Each column provides specific information. Your first task is to locate the proper shipping name for your hazmat using column 2. Proper shipping names are entries that appear in Roman type. Note that the proper shipping name is not always the same as the chemical name. Let's look at acetone as an example. Find it alphabetically in column 2. Acetone is a proper shipping name. Now look at ethanol. This entry includes 3 additional names in Roman type. Any of the 4 options can be used as the proper shipping name. Next, look at benzol. Entries in italics can't be used as proper shipping names. There is a reference to benzene, which is a proper shipping name. Sometimes there's more than one entry for the same proper shipping name. Compare the 3 entries for acetic acid. Note that the information in the table changes with the concentration of this material. And if the chemical name is not listed, a generic proper shipping name may be used, such as flammable liquids NOS, or not otherwise specified. Let's look again at benzene. Once you have located the proper shipping name, move horizontally along the row to column 3 for the hazard class or division. Benzene is a class 3 flammable liquid hazard. Now move across to column 4 to find the identification or ID number for benzene. It's UN 1114. This ID number is preceded by the abbreviation for United Nations, which means it's appropriate for both international and domestic transportation. Sometimes an ID number is preceded by NA, which stands for North American. An ID number with NA means the material may only be transported in the United States or to and from Canada. Continue across the row to column 5 for the packing group. Benzene is a PG2 material. The proper shipping name, hazard class or division, ID number, and packing group from columns 2 through 5 of the table make up the basic description for your hazmat.